Hey, it's Minji. I'm a music producer and a live performer, and today I'm going to be talking about finger drumming using the Ableton Push. So finger drumming for me is a way to be able to perform my beats. Vocalists and rappers can all kind of visually showcase their art through their voices, but as producers, this is our way to be able to showcase our work in a visually stimulating way. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but usually I play drums with my right hand and I launch different samples with my left hand. And disclaimer, I do not know how to play drums in real life. A lot of people can attest to that. We're just going to be tapping buttons here. And if you're someone who's always tapping the table to annoy people, think of this as your more creative way to channel your energy into something productive.
So let's go into Ableton. Finger drumming in Ableton takes place in the drum rack. So if you go to Instruments, then Drum Rack, you can just drag and drop it as a new track. You can see that there's 64 pads, and in each of them you can put pretty much anything you want. You can even put a whole instrument into one of those pads, but usually I work mostly with audio files. So let's get rid of that. This is a rack that I already made. You can see that if you double click any of these samples, you can pull up a more detailed view of what's going on. Each of these pads you can see is an instance of simpler because I put in audio files. So you can see that I chose only one section of the whole sample so that when I launch each of these, or once I launch this sample, only this section of the sample will play.
So let's talk about placement of sounds, starting with the drums. For drums, I usually reserve them to kind of this bottom right quadrant of the push. There's many ways to do this, but usually I end up using my thumb for the kick, ring finger for the snare, 2 and 3 for hi-hats, and pinky. It varies, but there's a clap on here now. So these are the sounds that I'll be using the most, and that's why I put them in places that are extremely accessible to just the natural resting position of my hand. So if you just kind of put your hand down, you can see that it kind of rests on this L-shaped location, I guess. So I put all the sounds that I'll use the most here. This upper row, I think I have a bunch of crashes on here. And then this upper row are sounds that I'll use even less because I'll have to reach further. So these are sound effects. And then for left hand, I kind of have a bunch of samples everywhere. I don't know. Usually I just place them in, a pattern that's good for me to memorize, or you can do whatever you want, honestly.
So going back into Ableton, one feature that I really want to mention is choking your samples. So choking is super important in trying to make your finger drumming sound as close to real drumming as possible. What it is you can basically form groups of sounds that cannot be allowed to play over each other. So if you play one sound and you play another, that first sound will be completely muted by the time the second one plays if they're in the same group. So this is super applicable to hi-hats. You can imagine an open hi-hat and a closed hi-hat normally wouldn't play at the same time just because that doesn't really happen in real drumming. So if you click this second button right here, you can open up this menu here, which has the choke groups that you can assign. Right now, I have an open hat here and then 3 closed hi-hats. They are not choked at all. So if I go to my push and I press a closed hat after an open hat, you can see that the open hat sound will carry through. And we don't want that. So we're going to assign choke groups. Gonna give it 2. And then we also assign the close hi-hat to the same choke group. So now if I go back to my push and I play these sounds, you can see that the close hi-hat completely mutes the open hi-hat just because it's pressed. So I want to do that for all of my hi-hats. So no matter which hat I choose, they will all mute out the sound of the open hi-hat.
So now all you have to do is practice. Yay. So I would just start with simple rhythms at first, you know, kick and snare. It's a pretty good beat right there. And then you can add in your hi-hats. Add in whatever else. So for the left hand, basically I made a beat and I didn't know what else to do with it, so I decided to chop it up and put little segments of the samples into these pads in the left hand portion of the push here. So I guess I can play some. So they're all just kind of random samples, I guess. But what's cool is that you can kind of play around with rhythm here and combine it with drums. And honestly, I've created so many beats that way, just from playing around with things that I cut up and playing around with rhythm. You can get a lot of creativity through that. So even just using 2 of these. These are also choked, or else you would have a terrible mess of sounds all blended in together. Don't want that. So I have all of these choked. Oops. I have all of these choked so that they won't play over each other. Alright, so I know we barely scratched the surface of what you can do with finger drumming and with the push and with Ableton in general, but I just want to share some features that I use every time when I'm finger drumming, so I hope that was helpful. These are some amazing female finger drummers and producers that I always am stalking on Instagram, so is that creepy? That I'm always supporting, there we go, on Instagram. So you guys should go check them out. Also, if you want to follow me, it's Beats by Minji. So yeah, I hope this was a fun video. Alright, bye.